Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So folks, I'm going to tell you something right now. This is going to be a little bit of a difficult episode for me to try and make because this is an episode where I could very easily go on tangents, but I'm trying to stay objective, I'm trying to stay on point, and I'm trying to, put out this information in a way that is both concise, but at the same time detailed. And also in a way that it's like, okay, I present everything to where you guys can all follow along, and it's not like I'm losing track of the content. But let's understand what this content's about. This content is about the second half or the other part of what's going on with all the madness, all the craziness surrounding the Micah Parsons trade with the Green Bay Packers. Because, okay, you have Lions fans and you have talking heads, you have analysts that are all trying to say, oh, well, because of this move here, the Packers are now out in front of the Lions. The Packers are going to have a shot at the Super Bowl. The Packers are going to most likely be able to re-win the NFC North Division. I have already put out 2 episodes where it's like, listen, you need to knock that nonsense off. You seriously need to knock it off because it's like, yes, Parsons is a great player. Parsons is going to help them out. But he's not going to help them out in the way you're thinking. I've talked about it extensively. If I can, I will put the link to the episode, specifically what I'm referring to, right back up at the top. So that way you can go back and you can reference it. But on the flip side of that coin, you also have a lot of Lions fans. A lot of Lions fans that are absolutely bitter, they are angry, they are frustrated with Brad Holmes and his inability, as they would call it, or his unwillingness to go out and make a big-time move like what the Packers just made. Because in their eyes, it's like, if you're serious about winning a Super Bowl, if you're serious about winning a championship, that move that the Packers just made is exactly the move you need to send. And I'm just sitting back here and I'm like, that might be the case if you want just one Super Bowl. But let's understand something here. That's also contingent upon the fact that the roster you currently have is able to win that Super Bowl. The Packers roster as they currently have it with Micah Parsons is not capable of doing it. I don't give a damn what any Packers fan wants to tell me. You don't have the quarterback, you don't have the offense, and your defense is missing key pieces in the middle and in the secondary. You don't want to hear about it? Sucks to suck. It's the truth. You don't like it? Tough noogies. But here's what I will say. If the Lions were able to make that move, yeah, absolutely, it would guarantee them going to the Super Bowl. But here's the problem with that. The Lions are not playing that style of game. They're not playing that game. And I know for a lot of Lions fans, ones that have been, Lions fans since the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, whatever have you, long before I was even a thought. They're like, I don't give a damn about anything else. I just want to win one. Well, I'm just going to put it out there for you. And I understand if it upsets you. I understand if you think that I'm being disrespectful. But the truth of the matter is this. That's short-sightedness. That is why you are where you're at and why Brad Holmes is where he's at. The Lions are not interested in just one damn bite at that apple. They want multiple bites at the apple. They want Dynasty. That's what they're after. Yes, the ultimate goal of any team in the NFL is to win a Super Bowl. It's the ultimate trophy in American sports. It's the only one that I know of where it's a sudden death playoff that determines who wins it. But the problem is that if you just win one Super Bowl, great, you get your name put in the history books. That's great and all. But past that, nobody's going to remember you. Because let's think about this here. Who are the teams that are remembered in the sports annals of freaking, NFL history books? Oh, that's right. The Packers of the 60s, the Steelers of the 70s, the Niners of the 80s, the Cowboys of the 90s, the Patriots in the 2000s and 2010s, and now currently the Chiefs. Well, wait a minute here. What are all those? They're dynasties. Why are they remembered? Because they won more than one damn Super Bowl. I understand Lions fans, they just want to win one just so that way they can say they won one. But that's not what the Lions are after. That's not what Brad Holmes is after. That's not what Dan Campbell's after. That's not what Jared Goff is after. That's not what anybody on that team is after. Yeah, they want to win a Super Bowl, but they want to win multiple Super Bowls. And I understand everybody's like, well, just win the first one first, and then we'll worry about everything else second. There's a problem with that thought process too. If you don't plan ahead and you just focus on the here and now, you're never going to be able to get to the future. You have to plan for the future as well. And that's why I think Lions fans, the reason why they're so bitter, they're so frustrated, they're so fed up with what Brad Holmes is not doing here is because of their short-sightedness. Because let's think about this here. You take a look at what the Lions have been doing. I can tell you this right now. It is very, very similar to what some of these dynasties have done in the past. In fact, I'm actually going to use another team here that's being talked about right now because of the whole Packers trade with Parsons being traded to them. It's the Dallas Cowboys. Of all the teams I would not want to talk about other than the Packers, it would be the Cowboys. But you have to think about it here. How the Lions are building their team right now is almost exactly how the Cowboys built their team back in the 1990s. Because think about it here. The Cowboys are coming in with a brand new owner. They're coming in with a brand new coach. Sounds already pretty familiar. The team that they had inherited, the new coach, the new owner, was absolutely dreadful. So it's like, yeah, there's already some similarities here. But it's not just the Cowboys. That's just the one I'm going to use quite explicitly in this episode. You can also talk about the Steelers. The point of the matter is that when you take a look at what the Lions are currently doing, they are not trying to be a shooting star, gazing across the sky, and it's here for 1 second and gone the next. They want to be a fixation. They want to be like, the North Star. They want to be like the Big Dipper. That's what they're looking for. And the Lions fans that want to constantly, for lack of a better terminology, they want to, whine, cry, and complain about all this. Their short-sightedness is what is holding them up from actually being able to say, listen, I can see the big picture here. It might not be what I want right now, but ultimately, what is it that you want? Seriously, what is it that you want? You want to win. You want to win a Super Bowl. So why not let Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell do what the hell they're doing? And not only will you win one Super Bowl, but, by the way, you'll win multiple Super Bowls. Seems to be a pretty fair damn trade, in my opinion. But let's take a look at this. How are the Lions building themselves, the way that they are? That's comparable to the Cowboys of the 90s or the Steelers of the 70s or other dynasties. Well, first and foremost here, you have to understand something. Every single dynasty that I can mention to you, the fans were in the same damn boat that you guys are right now. They were like, why are the teams doing what they're doing? Why are they not trying to build instantaneously? Oh, that's right, because there's a method to the madness. It takes patience. It takes being able to stay on course even when things are not going the way you necessarily would like them to be at the beginning of the whole process. You have to stay the course. You have to have patience. You have to have vision. There's a reason why Brad Holmes is where he is at, and there's a reason why we're at where we're at. Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Sheila, Chris Spielman, Mike Disner, they all have a vision. Their vision is to win multiple Super Bowls. Their vision is to build a roster that is sustainable for not just a year, not just 2 years, not just 3 years, but multiple years. And how does that all start? How has it all started here in Detroit? It started the same exact damn way that it got started in Dallas back in the 1990s. Because how it all got started was a culture change had to happen. And culture change starts at the top. Say what you want about Jerry Jones right now and all that nonsense. I don't give a damn. Jerry Jones right now doesn't factor into this conversation. I'm talking about when he first took over for the Cowboys back in the 90s. Because when you go back to it, the 90s, the Cowboys were dreadful to start it off. Because, that's right, the late 80s, the Cowboys were just absolutely rather painful to endure and watch. They were just horrible. Legendary coach Tom Landry, one of the best that's ever been in the business. But the problem is the NFL had clearly passed him by. All these other teams had figured out all of his innovations, and they had used those innovations to now, start beating him. So clearly a change was going to have to be made. The problem is that, neither the current ownership when Landry was there wanted to make the change, and the GM at the time was unwilling to fire him because that's Tom Landry. You don't fire Tom Landry. So what had to happen is somebody had to be brought in that didn't care about that, which is why the Cowboys owner, before Jerry Jones, said, hey, I'm going to sell my team to you for a lesser bid, because everybody else, when that previous owner had asked them, would you fire Tom Landry, they said no. Jerry Jones was the only one that said, yeah, I would. And that's exactly what happened. No sooner had, Jerry Jones taken over as the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, he fires Tom Landry. Albeit, he goes and he talks to him, he's respectful about it. But again, it sets up that villain persona that Jerry Jones has absolutely used to his advantage over the last, 30-something years. But the point of the matter is, they fire Tom Landry, they bring in Jimmy Johnson. Okay, now you have a completely new organizational operation in charge. You've got Jimmy Jones, you have Jimmy Johnson, who is this absolutely fiery head coach, and you have Jerry Jones, who is all about, hey, we're trying to build something to win here. And initially, when those two got together and when they were working together, it was a perfect fit. So, okay, that's the Dallas Cowboys story. Well, how is that similar to the Lions? Well, let's think about this. For the Lions, once Sheila took over, it didn't take long for her to make her impact and desire for the Lions to change and become successful very well known. She was much different than any other Lions owner that had been in charge up to that point. And once it became apparent to her that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn were not going to be the ones to facilitate this change, she then promptly fired them as her first major act as, taking over. And then she started the next process, which was finding a new GM and a new head coach, which was then why she first hired Brad Holmes, and then she brought in Dan Campbell. Both guys, much like how Jimmy Johnson and how, Jerry Jones were at the beginning, they were perfect for each other because, that's right, they talked, they communicated, they had the same vision, they had the same ideas about how they wanted to get the team where it needed to go. And think about it. Holmes has facilitated smart drafting and talent acquisition, and Campbell has instilled the culture that would become the backbone and bedrock for the team moving forward. Which, wait a minute here, that's very similar to what happened with Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. Brad Holmes played the role of, Jerry Jones in terms of, okay, you know what? When they first started out, they were making smart decisions in terms of drafting, in terms of acquisitions. But Campbell, much like Jimmy Johnson, hey, he set the tone. He set the tone. Now, how is it different? Because obviously not everything's 100% the same. It's different, obviously. Well, number one, Campbell was hired as when he was, but he wasn't taking over a legend. But Matt Patricia was no damn legend. The only thing he's legendary for is being an absolute failure. So, okay, that's different because Matt Patricia and Tom Landry should never even be in the same universe of conversation, number one. But furthermore, the change of Patricia to Campbell was not instantaneous like it was with the Cowboys. The change from Landry to Johnson, that was instantaneous. For the Lions, they gave Patricia and Quinn about half a season before they're like, okay, that's it, we're done. And then they took the remainder of that season to do their due diligence, to do their homework, and then they figured everything out and went with them. Plus, let's understand the circumstances about how those firings went down. When Tom Landry got fired, people looked at Jerry Jones like the devil. They absolutely were just like, dude, this guy is just absolutely, the most, meanest, ruthless guy in the entirety of the NFL. There's a reason why the subsequent firing of, Tom Landry and the hiring of Jimmy Johnson, it's still known as the Saturday Night Massacre in Dallas. Well, let's call for what it is here. When we fired Matt Patricia, nobody was screaming bloody murder for that. There were people in the streets just dancing joyously. So again, that's different. So, culture change starts at the top. That's number one, how things are very similar with the Lions and the Cowboys from the 90s. But also, let's think about this. What's the next thing that's similar? What's the next thing that the Lions have done that also falls very closely into what the Cowboys did in the 90s? Oh, Team building begins with a massive trade to start over. Let's think about this. When the Cowboys got started in 1989 with Johnson and obviously Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones. Man, those two having JJ as their initials is absolutely throwing me for a loop. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. When those two got started, it was abundantly clear for Jimmy Johnson that if the team was going to enjoy success sooner rather than later, they were going to need to make a big-time gamble and they were going to have to make a big trade. But unlike what the Packers did, they didn't trade for a big-time player. They traded away a big-time player. And the only thing they could do was to trade away running back Herschel Walker at the time because he was considered the one really good weapon that they had, and they traded him to the Minnesota Vikings. This trade is still considered the largest trade in NFL history, not only in terms of volume, in terms of impact, but also in terms of teams involved. Because this is one of the few trades in NFL history that has actually involved 3 teams. Most teams in NFL history, it's usually a 1v1. This one actually involved 3. And when you take a look at that, it involved the Vikings, the Cowboys, and the Chargers. Something that I didn't know until I actually did some more research on this. But also, when you take a look at the trade compensation, the bulk of the trade compensation was obviously between the Cowboys and the Vikings. And there was also a couple of things that went to the Chargers on the back end. Because what happened? The Vikings got Walker. They got the Cowboys' 3rd-round picks in both 1990 and 1991, along with a 10th round pick in 1990. And the Chargers got a 5th-round pick in 1990 as well. Whereas the Cowboys, they got a literal boatload in terms of picks because they got 4 players, but they also got the Vikings' 1st, 2nd, and 6th-round picks in 1990. They got a conditional 1st and 2nd-round pick in 1991, and they got a conditional 1st, 2nd, and 3rd-round pick in 1992. And then, here's the thing. The reason why they were conditional was all based upon the conditions of those players that got traded. The Cowboys got all those picks because they used the players to make sure that they got the picks. Which then, when you start taking a look at how they used those picks, take a look at this. In 1990, they drafted Hall of Fame running back Emmitt Smith in the 1st round. 1991, they drafted Russell Maryland, defensive tackle, and they also drafted Alvin Harper. Not necessarily Hall of Fame players, but they were big-time players for the Cowboys. They had a big impact for them. In 1991, for the 3rd-round pick, they drafted Eric Williams, a left tackle. Again, a really good player for them. 1992 in the 1st round, they drafted Kevin Smith, a cornerback. And then in 1992 in the 2nd round, they drafted, Darren Woodson. So, yeah, those picks definitely helped make the Cowboys into what they were in the 90s. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, wait a minute, David. It wasn't just the draft picks that the Cowboys did. Oh, yeah, you're right. The Cowboys also built their roster through free agent acquisitions because they signed Jay Novacek, the tight end in the 1990 free agency period. And they also traded for Charles Haley in 1992, the Hall of Fame defensive end. But let's put something in perspective here. Number one, that trade for Charles Haley happened after they had already made that big-time trade for all those draft picks, number one. Also, number two, you want to take a wild guess what was the trade compensation for getting Charles Haley, a guy that has, if I recall correctly, it's 6 or 7 Super Bowl rings? When the Cowboys traded for Charles Haley in 1992 from the freaking 49ers, all they had to give up for him was a 2nd-round pick in 1993 and a 3rd-round pick in 1994. Not even the same damn thing when it comes to the Micah Parsons trade. Not even close. And I'm going to tell you this right now. If you had to ask me who I would prefer to have in their prime, Charles Haley or Micah Parsons, I guarantee you this, 99.9% of everybody would freaking look at Charles Haley and say, take him all day. Don't even have to think about it. Now, I just pretty much explained the whole team building process that the Cowboys did. How is that similar to what the Lions have done? Oh, because the Lions started their rebuild with trading their one great player, just like what the Cowboys did with Herschel Walker. They traded Matthew Stafford. Again, the trade was considered one of the biggest trades in NFL recent memory, especially for the impact that it had. Because, okay, you're trading 2 franchise quarterbacks, but at the same time, the Rams are trading 2 first-round draft picks and a 3rd-round draft pick. And think about it. Those draft picks that the Lions got would be the basis of how the Lions have built their roster to where it is right now. And again, if you take a look at how the Lions have built their roster through free agency and some trades here and there, mostly free agency, but they've made such brilliant acquisitions such as Alex Anzalone, David Montgomery, DJ Reed, DJ Reader. Before we traded Tim Patrick away to the freaking, Jaguars, Tim Patrick, Jake Bates. These are just some of the guys that I'm mentioning here. So again, it's very similar. And again, that's also talking about Zadarius Smith before we cut him, we traded for him as well. And then obviously Khalif Raymond. Now, how's it different? Well, it's different because while the Lions did execute a big trade that jump-started the rebuild, there is a distinct difference in both timing and in circumstance. Number one, the Cowboys traded Walker before midseason started. The Lions traded Stafford during the offseason. Second, Herschel Walker did not make it abundantly clear that he wanted to leave the Cowboys. Stafford did. Stafford wanted out. So again, circumstances, timing was definitely different, but the end result has been virtually the exact same way. Because think about it. The Cowboys got all those picks, and they used those picks to build their team. But again, there's also a difference in how both of those teams used those picks. The Cowboys didn't make a ton of moves up or down during the drafting process to try and make more moves with those picks or try to get more picks from them. Brad Holmes, on the other hand, took 3 picks, and he easily turned those 3 picks into 10 plus, which, like I said, have been the bedrock of the Lions foundation and, their entire core of their team. Furthermore, the Lions have been immensely more successful in drafting than the Cowboys were back in the 90s. Because if you think about it, overall, even though the Cowboys had some successful players, I'm not going to take that away from them, the problem is that the only ones that are really name recognition worthy are obviously Emmitt Smith, Charles Woodson, and, Eric Williams. Those are the only 3 that most people are going to know. But the Lions have, on the other hand, have hit 3 to 4 times more and have stacked their roster top to bottom. And overall, they have the best young talent in the NFL. And finally, the other difference is that the Lions executed the trade to get their franchise quarterback in Jared Goff. The Cowboys already had theirs from 1989 because, that's right, they had already drafted Troy Aikman. So again, that's where there's differences and similarities. But again, the similarities are more prominent than the differences are. And then, obviously, when you think about it, the team building and the culture change that we had just talked about, it brought about winning and success. But again, it wasn't instantaneous. For the Cowboys, the trade and introduction of Johnson and Jones definitely made an impact right away as the players realized that obviously the status quo was different and expectations were higher. But again, success for the Cowboys took at least 2 years for them to fully start enjoying. And I'm actually talking about winning seasons. Because in Johnson's first 2 years as the head coach of the Cowboys, he was 1-15, and then in 1990 he was 7-9. But then in 1991, the Cowboys went 11-5. They got back into the playoffs, and that's when they secured their first playoff win in nearly a decade. Funny enough, though, the 1991 season when the Cowboys did that was where they got their asses handed to them by the Detroit Lions in the Pontiac Silverdome in the division round where we beat them, 38-6? That was a thrashing. So, again, the success that the Cowboys had, it took them a little bit of time. But after they had started, they kept climbing and getting better because they stuck to the process. Because then, think about this. The next season, after the Cowboys got thrashed by a division rival in terms of the playoffs, that's right. They went to their first Super Bowl since 1977 and won, which was also the last one that they had under Landry. Now, how is that similar to the Detroit Lions? Because, again, go back to when the Lions started their whole process. They, too, had to take their lumps early on. Because, that's right, the very first year under Campbell and Holmes, we went 3-13-1. Then the very next season, we start in 2022, and we're starting 1-6. And, oh my good Lord, you would just not believe how there were some fans that were saying, fire Dan Campbell, just restart all over again, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, dude, calm your jets. Have some patience. Have some faith. Kind of like what I'm saying right now in this episode. But think about this. After that 1-6 start, the Lions then turned around and they finished their season 8-2. And then After that, they finished the year 9-8, so they had a winning season only 2 years into Campbell and Holmes being in the program, being in the building. And then, that's right, the very next year, we win the division, we go to the playoffs, we win 2 playoff games, and on top of that, we get to the NFC Conference Championship game, which, that's right, was the first time that we had done either of those 2 things, win a playoff game and also get to the championship game, in 30 years. Because, that's right, when was the last time that happened? That was in 1991, which was, like I just said, the talking point with the Cowboys. Now, how's it different? The biggest difference comes from the fact that, the Cowboys enjoyed success later than what the Lions did. The Lions had a winning season in the second year of Campbell and Holmes. It took Johnson and, Jones, it took them 3 years for that to happen. The other big difference is that, after they had that thrashing, the Cowboys then went the next year and won the Super Bowl, which would have been year 3 or 4 for them. Whereas the Lions in year 4, they get the number 1 seed, they get into the divisional game against the Commanders, and we were eliminated by the Commanders. So again, there are differences. I'm not saying that there aren't, but the similarities are, again, very, very profound. So what I'm trying to point out here is this. As can clearly be seen, what the Lions are trying to do is they're trying to build dynasty. That's what they're trying to build. It takes patience, it takes vision, it takes faith. And it's something that a lot of Lions fans, or I should just say fans in general, they don't understand and they don't see until it actually starts getting to the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. But here's the point. If you completely throw out everything you've been building to get to that point for one bite at that apple, and now all of a sudden you have that one bite at that apple, and let's just say hypothetically you do win or you don't win, now you've completely upended all of that work to potentially have that dynasty. Because you were impatient, because you were short-sighted, because you didn't have faith, because you didn't trust the process. That's my whole point here. Everybody wants to talk about what the Packers did with Micah Parsons as far as them making a big-time trade because they're all in to go win a Super Bowl. That's great, grand, and glorious. I don't give a turkey about it. You want to know why? Because they're only going to get one shot at it. And the problem is their roster's not good enough. Because let's put it out there for you. Does the Packers roster right now look as good as the roster that the Rams had back in 2021? Not a damn bit close. The freaking Rams roster in 2021, it was loaded with superstars. The Packers don't have but maybe a few of those. And that's primarily the guy they just traded for, which is Micah Parsons. You might also throw in Xavier McKinney. Okay, fine. Josh Jacobs might be also considered that as well, but it's like past that, you really don't have anybody. That's my whole point. The Packers made a move to win right now, but they don't have the roster for it. And now you have all these Lions fans that are seeing what the Packers did, and they're like, why won't Brad Holmes do the same? Maybe it's because Brad Holmes actually understands his history and is actually trying to build a dynasty, so that way we don't have just one shot at the apple, but we have multiple shots at the apple, so that way we can win multiple Super Bowls, so then that way you Lions fans that are getting all crazy and, mad about the whole situation will actually be grateful for the whole process? Because let me put this out there for you. The Packers traded away 2 first-round draft picks, right? Well, again, like I said, when you take a look at all the dynasties that have been born over the last, 30, 40, 50 years, they didn't make any massive trades. In fact, let's just put this out there for you. I just talked about how all the Cowboys picks that they made, right? Let's take a look at the Steelers. The first team that won 4 Super Bowls. The first team that had back-to-back Super Bowl wins twice. They drafted pre-70s and in the 1970s. Terry Bradshaw, Lynn Swann, Stallworth, Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, Harris, Mean Joe Green, Mel Blount, Mike Webster. I mean, dude, those are all Hall of Famers. The Packers, when they had their first dynasty, in their only dynasty, in the freaking, 60s, and I guess you could also call it the late 50s, but primarily the 60s. Oh, that's right. They had Bart Starr, they had Gregg, they had Horning, they had Kramer, Nitschke, Taylor, Adderley, and Robinson. Think about that. The Steelers had 4 Super Bowls from drafting. The freaking Packers had 2 Super Bowls and were 5-time NFL champions. And the first and only team First and only team in NFL history that's had a three-peat. 65, 66, and 67. In terms of NFL championships and also in terms of Super Bowls. I'm going to tell you this right now. There's a reason why those teams are remembered because of what they did. Nobody remembers the one-off Super Bowl champions. Oh yeah, sure, they might get talked about, like, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or, maybe some other team that just had a one-off Super Bowl win, and it's like, hey, you know what? They won a Super Bowl. Yay! Great. Nobody remembers them because everybody's too busy remembering all the dynasties. That's what the Lions are after. That's what Brad Holmes is after. If that's not something that interests you, then I'm sorry. The moves that they're going to continue to make, they're going to frustrate the hell out of you. But understand, it ain't going to change because your frustration level is mounting. So you have one of two options. You can either get over it and understand what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are trying to do, or as hard as I hate to say it, and it's going to sound really, really mean, you might as well find a different team to root for, or just stay in the background until you're actually willing to get on board with the process, because this is what the Lions are doing, and I 100% endorse it, because it's the right move. You build for the future by actually making plans for the future. You do not build for the future by playing the right now game. That's never worked. It never has worked. You have to plan for the future by making sure you're set up for the future. Not, we're going to plan for the future by putting everything in the middle right now. That never works. Never has, never will. But anyway, folks, I've gone on this quite a bit. I've tried to keep it concise, but unfortunately, there's just way too much information. So I do apologize for that. But having said that, I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage you all to watch the next episode. Also, if you like the content, please subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so already. But if you just subscribed and you've not yet done so, or if you just subscribed to the past and forgot to do so at the time, want to highly encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content I push out. Hope y'all are doing well. Hope y'all got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.